Silence. Darkness. A vacuum of consciousness that stretched beyond the limits of time itself. These were all Commander Jack's Harrow knew for 3 centuries. His body suspended in a translucent, alien cocoon, a technology the Zanari Empire had perfected long before they engaged humanity in the Galactic War. The cocoon's amber fluid preserved his cells, his memories, his very essence in a state between life and death. Not quite alive, yet far from dead. His last memory had been of fire and chaos. The final battle above Earth's atmosphere, the desperate gambit that had failed, the Zanari flagship looming overhead like a predator about to strike. And then, nothingness. Now, he floated, dreamed, perhaps, of battles lost, of comrades fallen, of a future that never came to pass. In the vast underground repository of the Zanari Empire's most precious war trophies, Commander Harrow's cocoon sat among thousands of others, a testament to the Empire's victory, a reminder of their supremacy over the rebellious human species. Each cocoon contained a high-ranking human officer, preserved as living museum pieces, their consciousness dimmed to the barest flicker, trophy soldiers from a conquered race. The repository existed 20 levels beneath New Terra's surface. The former Earth now transformed into a stratified megacity, where Zanari architecture dominated the skyline, and human settlements were relegated to the darkest, most polluted lower levels. It was a place forgotten by most, visited only by the occasional Zanari dignitary seeking to reminisce about their species' greatest triumph. But tonight was different. The soft hum of the preservation systems was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Cautious, deliberate footsteps that didn't match the confident stride of Zanari guards. A slender figure moved through the dimly lit corridors, her movements precise and purposeful. Lyra was neither fully human nor fully Zanari, a hybrid engineer born of the Empire's genetic experiments, combining Zanari intellectual capacity with human adaptability. Her skin held the faintest blue tint of her Zanari heritage, but her eyes were human, large, expressive, and currently filled with determination. Officially, she was conducting a routine maintenance check on the preservation systems. Unofficially, she was pursuing a signal anomaly that had appeared on her monitoring screens 3 days ago, a fluctuation in one specific cocoon that defied explanation. Lyra moved through the rows of suspended bodies, each encased in their amber prison, their faces frozen in expressions of shock, pain, or determination. She checked her handheld scanner again, following the signal until she stood before the cocoon of Commander Jack's Harrow. Unlike the others, his expression was serene, almost peaceful. His dark hair floated around his face like a halo, and his military uniform, though faded, still bore the insignia of the United Earth Command. According to the records, he had been one of the last commanders to surrender, his tactical brilliance having prolonged the inevitable defeat by nearly 2 years. "Fascinating," Lyra whispered, studying the readouts on her scanner. The cocoon was emitting unusual neural patterns, almost as if its occupant was dreaming. In 300 years of preservation, no human specimen had ever shown such activity. She placed her hand against the translucent material, feeling its cool, gelatinous texture. And then, something impossible happened. Through her neural implant, designed to interface with Zanari technology, came a whisper. Faint, desperate, unmistakable. "Wake up, we're losing again." Lyra jerked her hand away, her heart racing. The message had been in perfect Zanari language, yet she knew it had come from within the cocoon. She glanced at the security cameras, making sure no one was watching, then reconnected her neural interface to the cocoon's control system. "Hello?" She projected the thought cautiously. Silence stretched for so long that Lyra began to doubt what she had heard. Then, "Losing," The resistance wake me. The decision Lyra made in that moment would change the course of the Empire forever. She knew the penalty for unauthorized revival of preserved specimens was death. She knew that awakening a high-ranking military officer from the old Earth regime would be considered treason of the highest order. Yet something in that desperate whisper resonated with the human part of her soul, the part that had endured discrimination and second-class status her entire life, despite her valuable skills. With trembling fingers, she bypassed the security protocols and initiated the revival sequence. The cocoon's amber fluid began to drain slowly. Life support systems activated with a low hum. The vital sign monitors flickered to life, displaying erratic patterns as Commander Harrow's body began the painful transition from suspended animation to full consciousness. "I hope you're worth the risk," Lyra whispered, glancing nervously at the entrance to the repository. She estimated she had approximately 20 minutes before the system would automatically alert security to the unauthorized revival. 20 minutes to wake a man who had slept for 3 centuries. 20 minutes to explain what had become of his world. 20 minutes to escape with a living relic of humanity's last stand. Inside the cocoon, Jax Harrow's consciousness began its long journey back from the void. The first sensation was pain, exquisite, all-encompassing pain as nerve endings reactivated after centuries of dormancy. The second was confusion, fragmented memories colliding against the reality of his awakening. The third was purpose, dim but growing stronger with each passing second, a sense that he was needed once more. As the amber fluid receded, Jax gasped his first breath in 300 years, his lungs burning as they filled with air instead of preservation fluid. His eyes opened to a blurry world of shadows and muted colors. A face hovered above him, human-like but not entirely human. Blue-tinged skin, concerned eyes. "Commander Harrow," the stranger whispered urgently. "We don't have much time. Can you move?" Move? Jax wasn't sure he remembered how. His limbs felt leaden, his thoughts scattered like stars across the void of space. But the urgency in the stranger's voice triggered something deep within him, the soldier's instinct to respond to a crisis. With tremendous effort, he lifted one arm, then the other. The stranger, a woman, he now realized, helped him sit up. The room spun around him, and he would have fallen if not for her support. "Who?" His voice emerged as a raspy croak, his vocal cords struggling after centuries of disuse. "My name is Lyra. I'm an engineer, and I've just committed treason by waking you." She worked quickly, disconnecting monitoring devices from his body. "We have less than 15 minutes to get you out of here before security arrives." "Where am I?" Jax managed, his mind still struggling to reconcile his last memories with his current situation. Lyra's expression grew somber. "You're in the Zanari Trophy Repository, beneath what used to be New York City. You've been preserved here for 300 years. Commander, 300 years." The words hit Jax like a physical blow. 3 centuries gone. Everyone he had known. Everyone he had fought alongside. Everyone he had loved. All dust now. "The war?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Long over," Lyra confirmed, helping him to his feet. His legs buckled beneath him, muscles atrophied despite the cocoon's preservation properties. "Humanity lost. Earth, now called New Terra, is under Zanari control, as are all former human colonies." She supported his weight as she guided him toward a service exit, moving as quickly as his weakened state would allow. "I need to get you into different clothes. That uniform will get us both executed on sight." Jax glanced down at his faded uniform, the symbol of a civilization now conquered and transformed. "Why wake me now? After all this time?" Lyra paused, her expression uncertain. "You contacted me. Somehow, through the cocoon's neural interface. You said, 'Wake up.'" We're losing again. Jax frowned, having no memory of reaching out to anyone. That's impossible. I was unconscious. Nevertheless, it happened, Lyra insisted, helping him into a maintenance corridor where she had stashed a bundle of civilian clothes. And I believe it happened for a reason. The timing couldn't be more critical. As Jax struggled to change into the nondescript gray garments, his movements becoming marginally more coordinated with each passing minute, Lyra explained the current political situation. The Zanari Empire has ruled for 3 centuries, but cracks are beginning to show. Resources are strained. Colonial worlds are showing signs of unrest. The hybrid population, mixed Zanari and human, like me, is growing and demanding equal rights. She glanced at her scanner, checking for security alerts. There's an underground resistance, but they lack leadership and vision. They need a symbol. And you think that's me? Jax asked incredulously. A relic from a failed war? Perhaps, Lyra replied. Or perhaps you've been preserved for 300 years because you're the only one who knows something vital. Something that could change everything. Before Jax could question her further, an alarm began to blare throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the corridor, and a computerized voice announced in the Zanari language, "Security breach in Preservation Sector 7. All personnel on alert. Containment protocols activated." "They've discovered you're missing," Lyra said, a hint of fear creeping into her voice. "We need to move faster." She guided him toward a service elevator, supporting his weight as his legs threatened to give out beneath him. "This will take us to the lower city levels, the human sectors. We can lose ourselves in the crowd there." As the elevator doors closed behind them, Jax leaned heavily against the wall, his mind racing to process all that had happened. 300 years lost, a world transformed beyond recognition, and now, hunted by the very empire that had kept him as a trophy for centuries. "What did you mean?" he asked, fixing Lyra with an intense gaze. "When you said I might know something vital." Lyra hesitated, then met his eyes directly. "There are stories, Commander. Legends passed down among both humans and hybrids. They say that before the final surrender, you discovered something about the Zanari, a weakness, a secret, that could have turned the tide of the war. But you were captured before you could use it." She lowered her voice, though they were alone in the elevator. "Some believe that's why you, specifically, were preserved, rather than executed like most of the other high-ranking officers. The Empress wanted to ensure that whatever you knew died with you." Jax closed his eyes, searching his fragmented memories. There had been something in those final days, a discovery, a plan, but the details remained frustratingly out of reach, lost in the fog of his long sleep. "I don't remember," he admitted finally. "Not yet." "It may come back to you," Lyra said. "The neural effects of long-term preservation can take days to fully dissipate." The elevator shuddered to a halt, and the doors opened onto a scene that stole Jax's breath away. Gone was the Earth he had known. In its place stood a vertically stratified metropolis, layers upon layers of structures extending both upward into the smog-filled sky and downward into the depths of what had once been the planet's surface. They had emerged onto a narrow walkway, overlooking a vast cavern of human habitation. Level 17, according to the markers. Above them, barely visible through the industrial haze, loomed the elegant spires and floating platforms of the upper city, the Zanari domains. Below them stretched the human sectors, cramped, polluted, illuminated by harsh artificial lighting that never dimmed. "Welcome to New Terra, Commander," Lyra said grimly. "This is what remains of human civilization." Jax stared in horrified fascination at the scene before him. Thousands of humans moved through the cramped streets below, their movements carrying a weight of resignation that spoke volumes about their place in this new world order. Holographic advertisements in the Zanari language flashed overhead, Incomprehensible to most of the residents they loomed over. Surveillance drones darted through the air like mechanical insects, their cameras constantly scanning the crowds. "How many?" he asked hoarsely. "How many humans survived?" "Billions," Lyra replied. "The Zanari didn't want to exterminate us, just subjugate us. We're a labor force, mostly. Some serve as household staff for wealthy Zanari. Others work in the mines or factories. A fortunate few, like myself, have specialized skills that earn us slightly better treatment." She guided him along the walkway, moving purposefully toward a specific destination. "The worst part isn't the conditions," she continued. "It's the hopelessness. 300 years of occupation has bred generations who know nothing but submission. Most don't even remember why we fought against the Zanari in the first place." Jax felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had failed. They all had failed to protect Earth and its people from this fate. And while he had slept in suspended animation, generations of humans had lived and died under Zanari rule. "Where are you taking me?" he asked, struggling to keep pace with Lyra despite his gradually returning strength. "To someone who might help us," she replied cryptically. "A doctor who treats hybrids and humans off the official registry. He has connections to the Resistance." They descended several more levels, the environment growing progressively more dilapidated with each downward transition. By the time they reached level 23, the air was thick with industrial pollutants, the lighting sporadic and failing, and the inhabitants visibly more desperate. Lyra led him through a maze of narrow alleys until they reached a nondescript door, marked only with a faded red symbol that Jax didn't recognize. She knocked in a specific pattern, and after a moment, the door slid open to reveal a dimly lit medical facility. The man who greeted them was tall and gaunt, with the weathered face of someone who had seen too much suffering. His eyes widened in shock as they fell on Jax. "By the stars," he whispered. "It can't be." "Dr. Marcus Reeve," Lyra introduced him. "He was born in the Resistance. His grandfather fought in the war." Dr. Reeve stared at Jax as if seeing a ghost. "Commander Harrow," he said finally. "My grandfather served under you in the Battle of Proxima Centauri. He had your picture on our wall until the day he died." Jax nodded acknowledgement, unsure how to respond to being a historical figure to this man. "Your grandfather was a brave soldier, I'm sure. He said you were the best tactician humanity had ever produced," Reeve continued, ushering them inside and securing the door behind them. "That if anyone could have beaten the Zanari, it would have been you." "Clearly, I failed," Jax replied bitterly. "We all failed," Reeve corrected him. "But perhaps it's not too late to set things right." He led them through the clinic to a back room that appeared to be a combination of living quarters and operations center. Holographic displays showed various sectors of the city, and a secure communication terminal sat in one corner. "He needs medical attention," Lyra explained. 300 years in a preservation cocoon. I revived him less than an hour ago." Reeve nodded, immediately shifting into doctor mode. He guided Jax to an examination table and began scanning him with sophisticated medical equipment that looked to be a hybrid of human and Zanari technology. "Remarkable," he murmured as he studied the results. "Muscle atrophy is present, but minimal considering the time frame. Neural pathways are re-establishing themselves at an accelerated rate. The Zanari preservation technology is truly extraordinary." "Can you help him recover faster?" Lyra asked. "Security will be searching for us both. We don't have much time." "I can administer some targeted regeneration compounds," Reeve replied, preparing an injection. "They'll speed up muscle recovery and neural integration, but there's no miracle cure for 3 centuries of suspended animation." As the doctor worked, Jax struggled to organize his thoughts. "Tell me about this resistance," he said. "What are they fighting for after all this time?" Lyra and Reeve exchanged glances. "It's complicated," Reeve began. The original resistance, the one my grandfather joined, was fighting for complete liberation from Zanari rule. But after 2 centuries of failure, goals became more modest: equal rights, better living conditions, political representation. Most humans today have never known freedom, Lyra added. They can't imagine a world without Zanari dominance. The very concept seems like a fantasy. So what changed? Jax asked. You said the timing of my revival couldn't be more critical. Why now? Reeve administered the injection, then pulled up a holographic display showing news reports in the Zanari language. The Empress is dying, he explained. She's ruled for over 200 years. But even with their advanced medical technology, the Zanari lifespan has its limits. Her daughter, the Crown Princess, is poised to take the throne. And this matters because, Jax prompted, wincing slightly at the burning sensation spreading from the injection site. Because the princess represents a faction that believes the Empire has grown too tolerant, Lyra explained. They want to tighten control, especially over hybrids like me. There are even rumors of plans for sterilization programs to prevent further mixing of the species. Meanwhile, Reeve continued, the resistance has been gaining momentum, small victories, growing numbers. For the first time in generations, there's a sense that change might be possible. He fixed Jax with an intense gaze. And now, suddenly, the legendary Commander Harrow returns from the dead. Jax understood the implication immediately. You want to use me as a symbol, a rallying point. More than that, Lyra said quietly. We want you to lead us. Jax laughed bitterly. Lead you? I'm a relic, a failure. I couldn't save humanity then. What makes you think I can save it now? Because you're the man who nearly defeated the Zanari Empire at the height of its power, Reeve replied firmly. Because you supposedly discovered a secret so dangerous that the Empress kept you preserved for 3 centuries, rather than risk your knowledge falling into the wrong hands. A secret I don't even remember, Jax pointed out. But you might, Lyra insisted. And even if you never remember, your very existence is a weapon. The Zanari have used you as a symbol of their victory for centuries. Imagine what would happen if that symbol suddenly became the face of rebellion. Before Jax could respond, an urgent alert sounded from Reeve's communication terminal. The doctor hurried over, his expression growing grim as he read the incoming message. They've issued an empire-wide alert for both of you, he reported. Every surveillance system in the city is being programmed with your biometric data. They're deploying hunter drones to the lower levels. He looked up, his face pale. They're describing this as a Class 1 security threat, the highest possible designation. That's extreme, Lyra said, clearly shaken. Even for an escaped preservation subject? It confirms your theory, Reeve told her. They're terrified of what he might remember. Jax stood up from the examination table, testing his strength. The regeneration compounds were working quickly. He could feel sensation returning to his extremities, his movements becoming more fluid and coordinated. But his mind remained a jumble of fragmented memories and half-formed thoughts. How long before I'm back to full capacity? He asked Reeve. Physically? A few days with continued treatment? Mentally? The doctor shrugged. That's harder to predict. Your memories might return all at once, or gradually, or not at all, Jax finished for him. We need to move you to a more secure location, Reeve decided. I have connections who can transport you to one of the Resistance safe houses outside the city perimeter. No, Jax said firmly. I need to see more of this world you live in. I need to understand what I'm supposedly fighting for. Lyra looked concerned. That's extremely dangerous. Your face will trigger every security system in the city. Then disguise me, Jax insisted. But I won't commit to anything until I've seen what humanity has become with my own eyes. Reeve and Lyra exchanged glances again. Having one of those silent conversations that only occurs between people who have worked together in dangerous situations for a long time. We can use a molecular restructuring field, Reeves suggested reluctantly. It will temporarily alter your facial features enough to fool the basic recognition systems. But it won't stand up to a direct biometric scan. That's good enough, Jack said. I need to see what I've woken up to. An hour later, with his face subtly altered by Reeves' technology and dressed in the threadbare clothing typical of a lower-level resident, Jax walked the crowded streets of Level 25 with Lyra as his guide. His movements were still somewhat stiff, but in the shuffling crowds of exhausted laborers returning from their shifts, he didn't stand out. The reality of humanity's fall was even more devastating up close. Hollow-eyed children played in gutters beneath signs written in an alien language. Elderly humans sat in doorways, their bodies broken by decades of hard labor. Zanari propaganda holograms floated overhead, showing smiling humans gratefully receiving the benevolence of their blue-skinned rulers. Most of these people have never seen a real Zanari up close, Lyra explained quietly as they walked. The purebloods rarely venture below level 10. They use drones and hybrids like me to manage the lower levels. Jax noticed how other humans reacted to Lyra. The subtle shifting away, the averted gazes, the occasional hostile glare. They don't trust you, he observed. Would you? She asked simply. I'm neither fully human nor fully Zanari. Both sides see me as a potential traitor. As they turned a corner, they encountered a commotion ahead. A crowd had gathered around a small square where two enforcement officers, hybrids with more Zanari features than human, were interrogating an elderly man. What's happening? Jax asked quietly. Probably a documentation check, Lyra replied, trying to guide him away from the scene. Every human is required to carry identification, showing their work assignment and residence permit. If they're found outside their designated zones without proper authorization. Her explanation was cut short by a cry of pain. The old man had been struck to the ground by one of the officers, his meager possessions scattered across the filthy pavement. Without thinking, Jax stepped forward. Lyra grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. Don't, she hissed. You'll get us both killed. I can't just watch this, Jax growled. The soldier in him, the protector, awakening fully for the first time since his revival. You must, she insisted. For now, there will be time for fighting back, but not like this. Not here. The struggle on Jax's face was palpable as he watched the officers drag the old man away, presumably to a detention center. The crowd dispersed quickly, eyes downcast, shoulders hunched, the posture of people who had learned that intervention meant sharing the same fate. This is what 3 centuries of occupation has done to us, Lyra said softly. Broken our spirit, taught us to look away. Not everyone's spirit is broken, Jax observed, nodding toward a young woman who was quietly helping the old man's family gather their scattered belongings. There's still kindness, still humanity. Yes, Lyra acknowledged. And that's what gives the resistance hope. Not grand dreams of overthrowing the empire, but small acts of defiance and compassion that remind us who we are. They continued their tour of the lower levels, Jax absorbing the reality of this new world with growing anger and determination. They passed makeshift schools, where children learned both the official Zanari curriculum and, in whispered sessions, the true history of Earth. They saw underground marketplaces where humans traded goods and services outside the Empire's regulated economy. They witnessed secret religious ceremonies preserving faiths that the Zanari had officially banned centuries ago. Throughout it all, Jax began to recognize patterns, subtle signs and symbols that marked resistance sympathizers. Covert communications taking place in plain sight. The infrastructure of rebellion woven into the fabric of everyday life. You're more organized than you let on, he remarked to Lyra as they headed back toward Reeves' clinic. She smiled faintly. We've had 300 years to perfect the art of invisible resistance. What we lack isn't organization. It's hope. Genuine belief that change is possible. As they approached the clinic, Lyra suddenly stiffened. She pulled Jax into a shadowy alcove, her finger to her lips. Moments later, a patrol of fully armed Zanari soldiers marched past. The first pure-blooded Zanari Jax had seen since awakening. They were taller than humans, with blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the artificial light. Their eyes were larger, with vertical pupils like a cat's, and they moved with an unsettling grace that spoke of evolutionary advantages Jax could only guess at. Their weapons were unlike anything he had seen before, seemingly grown rather than manufactured, organic curves housing devastating technology. "Elite guardsmen," Lyra whispered once they had passed. "They never come to the lower levels unless something serious has happened." "Me," Jax stated rather than asked. "I'm what's happened." "Yes," she agreed. "And it confirms what we suspected. You are far more important to them than a mere war trophy." When they finally returned to Reeves' clinic, they found the doctor in a state of controlled panic. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "The security sweeps are intensifying. They've deployed truth seekers in the mid-levels." "Truth seekers?" Jax questioned. "Zanari with telepathic abilities," Lyra explained grimly. "They can sense deception, extract surface thoughts, if they reach the lower levels." "We need to move you immediately," Reeve interrupted. "I've arranged transport to a safe house in the old Washington ruins. The Resistance leadership is gathering there." "Leadership?" Jax raised an eyebrow. "I thought you said they lacked leadership." "They lack effective leadership," Reeve clarified. "Too many factions, too many competing agendas. But news of your revival is spreading through secure channels. They're coming together to meet you." "How many people know I'm awake?" Jax asked, alarmed at the security implications. "Only the most trusted cell leaders," Lyra assured him. "Perhaps 20 people total. The message was encoded. They know only that a sleeping weapon has been recovered." Jax paced the small room, his soldier's mind analyzing the situation from all angles. "This is happening too fast," he said finally. "We're reacting instead of planning. That's a good way to get everyone killed." "We don't have the luxury of time," Reeve argued. "The Empire is deploying resources I haven't seen used in decades. Whatever you know, or whatever they think you know, has them terrified. We need to leverage that fear before they find you." Jax stopped pacing and fixed them both with a hard stare. "What exactly do you expect me to do? Lead an armed uprising? Against an empire that spans multiple planets, with technology 3 centuries more advanced than anything I ever knew?" "No," Lyra said quietly. "We expect you to remember." "Remember what?" Jax demanded, frustration evident in his voice. "The weapon," Reeve said. "The secret you discovered in the final days of the war. The reason the Empress kept you alive when she executed every other high-ranking officer." Jax closed his eyes, concentrating on the fragmented memories that continued to surface in his mind. Flashes of a research facility, a captured Zanari ship, a discovery that had filled him with both hope and horror. "There was something," he admitted. "A research project I was overseeing. We had captured a damaged Zanari vessel during the Battle of Europa. There was technology on board that we didn't understand. But our scientists were making progress." He shook his head in frustration. "The details are still hazy." "That's more than we knew before," Lyra said encouragingly. "Perhaps seeing the Resistance's archives will trigger more memories. They've preserved what records they could from the war era." A sudden explosion rocked the building, sending dust raining from the ceiling. Emergency sirens began to wail throughout the lower levels. Reeve rushed to his security monitors. "Enforcement raid," he reported tensely. "Level 21. They're working their way down systematically." "They found us," Lyra said, her face pale. "Not yet," Reeve corrected. "But they will soon. This is a sector-wide sweep. He moved quickly to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a small arsenal of weapons. You need to leave. Now. Take the maintenance tunnels to the south perimeter. My contact will be waiting with transport. Jax selected a compact energy pistol from the collection, checking its charge with the practiced ease of a career soldier. You're not coming. Reeve shook his head. I need to stay. Too many people depend on this clinic. If I disappear, it will raise alarms. He handed Lyra a small data crystal. The coordinates are loaded. Find the resistance. Find your memories. Commander. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered ominously. Go. Reeve urged them toward a concealed exit at the back of the clinic. And, Commander. He hesitated, then said quietly, My grandfather believed in you. Don't prove him wrong. With those words echoing in his mind, Jax followed Lyra into the narrow maintenance tunnel that would hopefully lead them to safety. Behind them, the sounds of the enforcement raid grew louder, the harsh shouts of officers, the crash of doors being forced open, the occasional burst of weapons fire. Dr. Reeve will be all right, Lyra assured him as they hurried through the dimly lit passage. He's survived dozens of raids. His clinic is officially registered as a Zenari-approved medical facility for the lower levels. But Jax had seen enough of this new world to doubt such reassurances. The Zenari were hunting him with unprecedented resources. Anyone connected to him was in danger. The maintenance tunnel stretched for kilometers, occasionally branching or intersecting with other service corridors. Lyra navigated with confidence, having clearly used these hidden pathways before. They passed other furtive travelers, humans moving contraband, couples from different social strata meeting in secret, resistance messengers carrying information that couldn't be trusted to electronic channels. After nearly an hour of tense travel, they reached a vertical shaft with a maintenance ladder leading upward. We need to climb, Lyra explained. This will take us to an abandoned processing facility near the city perimeter. Our transport should be waiting on the other side. The climb was grueling, especially for Jax's still recovering body. But the regeneration compounds had done their work well enough that he managed without assistance. They emerged into a vast, derelict industrial space. Machinery, long silent. Catwalks rusted. The high windows caked with the grime of decades. This way, Lyra directed, leading him toward a loading dock on the far side of the facility. They were halfway across the open space when a brilliant light suddenly flooded the area, momentarily blinding them. The distinctive whine of Zenari shuttlecraft filled the air. Targets identified, announced a mechanized voice in the Zenari language. Commander Jax Harrow and Engineer Lyra 427. By order of the Imperial Guard, surrender immediately. Jax reacted instinctively, pulling Lyra behind a massive piece of machinery as energy weapons fire erupted from the hovering craft. The ancient metal glowed red where the beams struck, threatening to melt under the sustained assault. They were waiting for us, Lyra gasped, her composure finally cracking. They knew we were coming here. Someone betrayed us, Jax agreed grimly, assessing their situation with a tactician's eye. The loading dock was now blocked by the shuttle. The way they had come in was too exposed. Their only chance was to find another exit. He spotted a control panel near their position, ancient but possibly still functional. Cover your eyes, he warned Lyra, then fired his energy pistol at the panel. The resulting power surge sent the facility's emergency systems into chaos. Ancient alarm systems activated, sprinkler systems erupted, and most importantly, the backup generators kicked in, plunging the facility into darkness for several seconds before red emergency lighting activated. In that moment of darkness, Jax pulled Lyra toward a side corridor he had spotted earlier. They ran as energy beams cut through the air around them, the sound of armored boots hitting the floor indicating that troops had deployed from the shuttle. The corridor led to a small office area, and beyond that, a secondary loading dock, smaller but potentially serviceable as an escape route. The door, however, was sealed by an ancient electronic lock. "Can you open it?" Jax asked Lyra, taking up a defensive position to cover their rear. She examined the lock, then pulled a small device from her pocket. A hacking tool of some kind. "It's an old human system. Should be easy enough." While she worked, Jax heard the approaching footsteps of their pursuers. He counted at least 6 distinct patterns, a full squad of Imperial guards. "How much longer?" he whispered urgently. "Almost there," Lyra replied, her fingers dancing across the hacking device. "Just need to bypass the final. Got it." The door slid open with a protesting groan of long unused mechanisms. Beyond it lay a small loading area and, miracle of miracles, a transport vehicle, a rugged, wheeled conveyance designed for the wastelands beyond the city perimeter. A tall figure stood beside it, tense and alert. At their appearance, he raised a weapon, then quickly lowered it. "You're late," he said simply. "We had company," Jax replied, hurrying Lyra toward the vehicle as he continued to watch their back trail. The first of the Imperial guards appeared at the far end of the corridor just as they reached the transport. Jax fired several covering shots, forcing the guards to take cover, buying precious seconds as their new ally started the vehicle's engine. "Get in!" the man shouted, and they didn't need to be told twice. The transport surged forward, just as energy beams began to rain down around them. Their driver maneuvered skillfully through the debris-strewn lot surrounding the facility, heading for a massive breach in the perimeter wall that separated the city from the wasteland beyond. As they crashed through the opening, Jax caught his first glimpse of what lay outside the stratified metropolis that had once been a thriving human city. A desolate landscape stretched to the horizon, the earth scorched and barren, occasional ruins protruding like broken teeth from the ravaged ground. "What happened here?" he asked, the horrific vista momentarily distracting him from their pursuit. "The cleansing," their driver answered grimly, navigating the vehicle over the rough terrain with practiced skill. After the war, the Zanari decided that human cities were inefficient. They concentrated the population in a few megastructures and then sterilized the rest. Behind them, the whine of the shuttle grew louder as it cleared the perimeter wall in pursuit. "They're still on us," Lyra reported anxiously, watching through the rear viewport. "Not for long," the driver assured them. He flipped a switch on the console, and a compartment in the vehicle's roof opened. A compact missile launcher emerged, swiveling to track the approaching shuttle. "Imperial tech," Jax observed with surprise. "Stolen," the driver confirmed with a grim smile, along with the access codes that should prevent them from recognizing the threat until... The missile launched with a whoosh of superheated air, streaking toward the shuttle. There was a moment when it seemed the shuttle's defensive systems would activate in time, energy shields beginning to shimmer into existence. But then, the missile detonated in a blinding flash. When Jax's vision cleared, the shuttle was spiraling toward the ground, trailing smoke and debris. "That won't stop them for long," the driver said, already changing course to a more southerly heading. "But it should buy us the time we need to reach the safe house." "Thank you," Jax said, studying their rescuer more carefully now. The man was older, perhaps in his 60s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent much of his life in harsh conditions. His right arm appeared to be a sophisticated prosthetic, Zanari technology grafted to human flesh. "Lucas Reed," the man introduced himself. "Former Imperial Labor Overseer, current Resistance Coordinator for the Eastern Wasteland Sector." He glanced at Jax with open curiosity. "So you're the legendary Commander Harrow. You look good for a man of your age." "Preservation technology has its benefits," Jax replied dryly. "How far to this safe house?" "About 2 hours, assuming we don't run into any more Imperial patrols," Reed answered. "The Resistance leadership is already gathering. News of your revival has spread faster than we anticipated." "Is that a problem?" Lyra asked. Reed's expression grew serious. "It means we may have security concerns. The Empire has spies throughout the Resistance, The more people who know about the commander, the greater the risk. They drove in tense silence for some time, the vehicle bouncing over the uneven terrain of what had once been the eastern seaboard of the United States. Occasionally, they passed the ruins of small towns or isolated structures, ghostly remnants of a world Jax had known. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, exhaustion began to overtake him. 300 years in suspension, followed by a day of constant crisis, had pushed his recovering body to its limits. Despite his best efforts to remain alert, Jax found himself drifting into an uneasy sleep. The dreams came again, more vivid now, fragments of memory coalescing into coherent scenes. He was in a research facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Earth's last secure bastion, as the Zanari forces claimed more territory each day. Scientists hovered around a cylindrical object recovered from the captured Zanari vessel. They were excited, speaking rapidly about resonance patterns and neural interfaces. "It's not a weapon," one scientist was saying. "It's a communication device, but not like anything we've seen before. It doesn't transmit messages. It transmits consciousness." "Explain," Jax heard himself say. "The Zanari aren't just technologically advanced," the scientist continued. "They're psychically linked. This device amplifies that connection, allowing them to coordinate across vast distances without conventional communications that we could intercept." "Can we disrupt it?" Jax asked. The scientist smiled. "Better. We can hijack it. Use it to send false information throughout their command structure. Create confusion, contradictory orders, maybe even pain if we modulate the signal correctly. That could turn the tide of the war," another officer said, hope evident in his voice. "If we can figure out how to operate it," the scientist cautioned. "It's designed for Zanari neurology. Using it would require—" The memory fragmented again, key details slipping away like water through his fingers. Jax struggled to hold on to the information, sensing its vital importance. But the dream was already fading. He awoke with a start as the vehicle came to a halt. Night had fallen, and they had arrived at what appeared to be the ruins of a small industrial complex, partially reclaimed by the wasteland's sparse vegetation. "We're here," Reed announced, powering down the transport systems. "Watch your step. The defenses are active." He led them through a carefully planned path among the ruins, avoiding areas that Jax's trained eye recognized as concealing motion sensors and other security measures. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a collapsed building. Reed pressed his palm against a section of concrete that looked no different from the surrounding rubble, and a hidden door slid open. "Welcome to Sanctuary," he said, ushering them inside. The contrast between the desolate exterior and the interior couldn't have been more stark. The underground facility was a marvel of salvage technology and ingenious adaptation. Lighting panels salvaged from Zanari outposts illuminated clean corridors. Hydroponic gardens provided fresh produce. A command center hummed with activity, monitors displaying information from across the former United States. And most surprisingly, there were children, playing, studying, living a life that seemed almost normal despite the circumstances. "You have families here," Jax observed. "We're not just a resistance cell," Reed explained. "We're the beginning of a free human society. What we're fighting for isn't just the defeat of the Zanari. It's the rebirth of humanity as an independent species." He led them to a conference room where a dozen people were gathered around a holographic display. The conversations stopped abruptly as they entered, all eyes turning to Jax. "My friends," Reed announced, "I present Commander Jax Harrow of the United Earth Command. Commander, these are the leaders of the Eastern Resistance Network." A mixture of awe, hope, and skepticism showed on the faces around the table. These people had grown up with Jax as a historical figure, a legend from humanity's last stand. Now that legend stood before them in the flesh, and they clearly didn't know quite how to react. An older woman with steel-gray hair finally broke the silence. I'm Governor Helena Chen of the Boston Underground. My grandfather served in your fleet during the Battle of Mars. She approached and offered her hand, which Jax shook firmly. I've spent my life studying your tactics, Commander. They're still teaching them in what passes for military academies in the Resistance. I'm honored, Jax replied, genuinely touched by the unexpected connection to his past. Though I should point out that those tactics ultimately failed. Against overwhelming odds, a younger man interjected. He had the distinctive blue-tinted skin of a hybrid, though his features were predominantly human. The Zanari outnumbered Earth forces 7-1 and had technological superiority in virtually every category. The fact that you held them off for as long as you did was nothing short of miraculous. Commander, these are the representatives of our major factions. Reed continued with introductions. Helena, you've met. This is Thomas Williams, our Chief of Intelligence, Dr. Sarah Elliott, Head of Research and Development, Major Kell, Commander of our limited military forces, and representatives from Washington, Philadelphia, and the Carolina enclaves. Jax acknowledged each in turn, his tactician's mind automatically assessing them, their strengths, their likely biases, their potential as allies or obstacles. And what about you? He asked Lyra, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since their arrival. Where do you fit in this organization? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Lyra shifted nervously. Lyra is not officially part of the Resistance, Reed explained carefully. Until today, she was an Imperial engineer with access to restricted facilities. Her decision to free you and escape with you was unexpected. The implication was clear. They didn't fully trust her. A hybrid who had worked for the Empire until mere hours ago represented a significant security risk, regardless of her actions in freeing Jax. I understand your caution, Lyra said, addressing the group directly. I've spent my life walking a line between two worlds, never fully accepted by either, but I made my choice when I woke the commander. There's no going back for me now. Why did you do it? The intelligence chief, Williams, asked bluntly. Why risk everything for a preserved war criminal, which is how the Empire classifies the commander? Lyra hesitated, then replied with simple honesty. Because he called to me. Through the neural interface, he said we were losing again, and I believed him. That's not possible, Dr. Elliott objected. The preservation cocoons maintain minimal neural activity, but not enough for conscious communication. Nevertheless, it happened, Lyra insisted. Jax intervened before the discussion could devolve further. Whether you trust Lyra or not, she risked her life to free me and get me here. I wouldn't be standing before you without her help. He fixed Williams with a hard stare. In my military, that earned a person the benefit of the doubt. Williams held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slightly. Not agreement, but acknowledgement of the point. In any case, Governor Chen redirected the conversation. We have more pressing matters to discuss. The Empire has deployed unprecedented resources to recapture you. Commander, every security system on the continent has been updated with your biometric signature. Truth seekers are conducting house-to-house searches in the human sectors. They've even recalled military units from the outer colonies. Which confirms our suspicions, Major Kell added. You possess information that terrifies them. I'm beginning to remember fragments, Jax acknowledged. A research project involving Zanari communication technology. But the details are still unclear. Perhaps this will help, Dr. Elliott said, activating the holographic display. It showed a schematic of a cylindrical device that looked hauntingly familiar to Jax. This was reconstructed from fragmented records that survived the war. We believe it was the focus of Project Resonance, your final research initiative before the surrender. Jax stared at the rotating image, and another memory surfaced, clear and sharp this time. It's a psychic amplifier, he said slowly. The Zanari used it to coordinate their forces across vast distances. We were attempting to hijack it, to disrupt their command structure. He frowned, concentrating. But there was a problem. The device was designed for Zanari neurology. Using it required a compatible interface. "A hybrid," Lyra whispered, understanding dawning on her face. "You needed someone with both human and Zanari neural patterns." "Yes," Jax confirmed, the memory becoming clearer. "But this was 300 years ago. The Zanari invasion was recent. There were no hybrids yet." "Except there were," Governor Chen said quietly. "The first human Zanari hybrids were created in Imperial laboratories during the final years of the war. Experimental subjects, most of whom didn't survive the process. But you found one who did," Reed guessed. "A hybrid who could operate the device." Jax closed his eyes, focusing on the memory that hovered just beyond his reach. "There was a child," he said finally. "A girl, no more than 10 years old. She had been a prisoner in a Zanari research facility that our forces liberated. She was the only survivor of their experiments." The room had gone completely silent, all eyes fixed on Jax as he struggled to reconstruct this crucial piece of history. "We brought her to our facility," he continued. "Our scientists determined that her neural patterns might be compatible with the device. But He paused, a wave of old guilt washing over him. "I refused to use her. She was a child, traumatized, afraid. I couldn't subject her to more experimentation, even if it might win the war." "So what happened?" Major Kell prompted when Jax fell silent. "The Zanari found us," Jax said grimly. "Somehow, they traced the device. Their forces overwhelmed our defenses. I ordered an evacuation, tried to destroy the facility, but—" He shook his head. "That's where my memories end. I assume I was captured before I could complete the destruction." "And the child?" Lyra asked. "I don't know," Jax admitted. "I gave her to my most trusted officer with orders to get her to safety. Whether they succeeded." Dr. Elliot manipulated the holographic display, bringing up ancient personnel records. "What was the child's name? Perhaps there's some record of her fate." Jax concentrated, reaching for the memory. "Alara," he said finally. "Her name was Alara." The reaction around the table was immediate and electric. Glances were exchanged, breath was held, and all eyes turned to Lyra. "What?" Jax asked, sensing the sudden tension. It was Governor Chen who answered, her voice hushed with the weight of revelation. "Alara was the birth name of the current empress of the Zanari Empire." The implications hit Jax like a physical blow. The hybrid child he had tried to protect had somehow become the ruler of the very empire that had created her through cruel experimentation. The girl whose exploitation he had refused had grown up to preside over 3 centuries of human subjugation. "That's not possible," he objected. "She was a victim of the Zanari, not one of them." "History is written by the victors," Williams said grimly. "The official imperial narrative is that Empress Alara was the first unity child, a symbol of the harmonious future between our species. The reality was clearly very different." "If the Empress is the hybrid child from your research facility," Reed reasoned, "then she knows exactly what the device was capable of. She knows that with the right operator, it could have turned the tide of the war. And now, with millions of hybrids in existence, it could turn the tide of a new war." Jax finished the thought. "A rebellion led by someone who knows how to use the device, which is why they're hunting you so desperately," Lyra added. "You're the only one who knows where the device was hidden, or if it was destroyed." Jax closed his eyes, searching his fragmented memories once more. "I tried to destroy it," he said slowly. "But I'm not certain I succeeded. The facility was located beneath Mount Rainier. If any part of it survived the war—" "We need to find out," Major Kell stated firmly. If the device still exists, and if we can locate a hybrid with the right neural pattern to operate it, we could disrupt the Empire's control across the entire planet, maybe even the whole system. It would mean war, Jax cautioned. A war that would cost countless lives on both sides. We're already at war, Governor Chen replied. We just haven't been fighting back effectively. Until now. The meeting continued late into the night as plans were formulated. Intelligence was shared, and strategies were debated. The Resistance had more resources than Jax had initially assumed. Sleeper agents in the Imperial bureaucracy. Limited, but functional military capabilities. And a communication network that spanned the continent. What they had lacked was a unifying purpose, and the hope of actual victory, rather than mere survival. Jax's arrival had changed that equation dramatically. As the meeting finally adjourned in the early hours of the morning, Lyra approached Jax in the corridor outside the conference room. You should rest, she said, noting his exhaustion. Dr. Elliot has prepared quarters for you, and she wants to continue your regeneration treatments tomorrow. Jax nodded, but made no move to leave. There's something troubling me about all this, he said quietly. Something that doesn't quite fit. What do you mean? If Ilara, the Empress, is the same child I tried to protect, why would she keep me alive all these centuries? Why preserve me as a trophy when I knew the truth about her origins? Lyra considered this. Perhaps it was precisely because you knew the truth. You were the only one who remembered her as a victim, rather than a conqueror. Maybe that meant something to her. Or maybe she was waiting for something, Jax mused. Keeping me in reserve for a purpose we don't yet understand. Like what? I don't know, he admitted. But I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something crucial. Lyra touched his arm gently. Get some rest. Your memories are still returning. Perhaps more will become clear after you've slept. Jax allowed her to guide him to the quarters that had been prepared. A small, but comfortable room that had once been an office in the original facility. As he lay down on the narrow bed, exhaustion quickly overcame his troubled thoughts, and he fell into a deep sleep. The dreams came again, but different this time. Not memories, but something else. A presence in his mind, familiar yet alien. Jax Harrow, a voice whispered. Can you hear me? In the dream, he was back in the cocoon, floating in amber fluid, yet somehow conscious. Who are you? He asked the voice. You know who I am, the voice replied. You tried to save me once. Now I need your help again. A face formed in his mind's eye. A child's face, gradually aging, transforming into the regal countenance of a Zanari empress. Ilara. Why did you keep me alive? Jax demanded. Why preserve me for 3 centuries? Because I knew this day would come, the voice answered. The day when my daughter would seek to undo everything I've built. The day when both our peoples would need you again. Your daughter, Jax questioned. The crown princess? She believes in purity, Ilara's voice explained, tinged with sadness. She would eliminate the hybrids, subjugate humanity completely. All my work to gradually improve conditions, to move toward eventual equality. She would undo it all. Why should I believe you? Jax challenged. You've ruled an empire that has kept humanity enslaved for centuries. I've ruled an empire that allowed humanity to survive, the voice corrected. The alternative was extinction. Jax. The War Council wanted to sterilize Earth completely. I convinced them that humans had value, as workers, as genetic material, as a part of the galactic community. Images flashed through Jax's mind. Council meetings where a younger Ilara argued passionately against human extermination. Gradual improvements in human living conditions over the centuries. Secret directives easing restrictions on human education and movement. I had to move slowly, the voice continued. Change a system from within takes generations. But now there's no more time. My daughter moves against me. The device you tried to destroy, She's found it, and she intends to use it not to free humanity, but to control the hybrids, to turn them against both pure humans and pure Zanari. The device survived? Jax asked, alarmed. Yes, and in the hands of my daughter. It will mean the end of any hope for peaceful coexistence. What do you expect me to do? Jax demanded. I've been asleep for 3 centuries. I have no power, no authority. But you have knowledge, the voice insisted. Knowledge of how the device was meant to be used. Knowledge I made sure was preserved along with your body. And you have something else, the loyalty of someone who can help us stop my daughter. Lyra, Jax realized suddenly. She's not just any hybrid, is she? She is my granddaughter, the voice confirmed. Daughter of my youngest child, who shared my vision of unity. Lyra doesn't know her heritage. I kept it from her to protect her. But her neural pattern is compatible with the device, just as mine was. You woke me, Jax said, understanding dawning. Through the cocoon, you reached out to Lyra and used her connection to wake me. Yes, my powers have grown over the centuries, but my body is failing. I needed you, Jax. Needed someone who remembers the truth, who understands what's at stake. And what is at stake, exactly? Everything, the voice whispered. The future of both our species. The Crown Princess launches her coup in 3 days, during the Ascension ceremony. If she succeeds, she will use the device to enslave every hybrid mind to her will, creating an army that will exterminate full-blooded humans and any Zanari who oppose her vision of purity. What do you want me to do? Jax asked again. Come to me, the voice urged. Bring Lyra. Together, we can stop my daughter and use the device for its true purpose, to unite our species, rather than control them. And I should trust you because I could have let you die 300 years ago. Jax Harrow, I could have executed you along with the other Earth commanders. Instead, I preserved you, protected your mind, kept your knowledge intact for this moment. The voice grew fainter, more distant. The choice is yours. But know this, the Resistance cannot win a conventional war against the Empire. Their only hope, humanity's only hope, lies in alliance, not conquest. Jax awoke with a start, his heart racing. The dream had been so vivid, so real, that he could almost believe it had been an actual communication rather than a product of his subconscious. He sat up, rubbing his face, trying to sort through the implications. If what he had experienced was somehow a genuine contact from the Empress, it changed everything. But how could he possibly know if it was real, or simply his mind trying to make sense of fragmented memories? A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Lyra entered, carrying a tray of food and medical supplies. Dr. Elliot sent these, she explained. More regeneration compounds. She says you should be back to full physical capacity by tomorrow, if you keep up the treatments. Jax studied her face carefully, looking for any resemblance to the child he remembered. Any hint of her supposed imperial heritage. There was something in the eyes, perhaps, a depth and intelligence that seemed beyond her years. Lyra, he said carefully, what do you know about your parents? She blinked, surprised by the question. Not much. I was raised in a state creche, like most hybrids. My genetic profile indicated aptitude for engineering, so that's what I was trained for. She set down the tray and looked at him curiously. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand you better, Jax deflected. You've risked everything to help me. I realized I know very little about you in return. Lyra seemed to accept this explanation. There's not much to tell. I've lived a fairly ordinary life by hybrid standards. Graduated with honors from the Imperial Technical Academy. Assigned to preservation maintenance because of my attention to detail. She smiled faintly. Until I committed treason by waking you, my life was remarkably uneventful. Jax nodded, deciding not to share his dream just yet. Without corroborating evidence, It would sound like the delusion of a man still suffering the after-effects of long-term preservation. The resistance leaders are meeting again in an hour, Lyra informed him. They want to discuss plans for verifying whether the device still exists at Mount Rainier. I'll be there, Jax promised, accepting the regeneration compound she offered. As Lyra left, Jax found himself torn between two possible paths forward. He could continue with the Resistance's plan, potentially igniting a full-scale war that humanity might not survive. Or he could pursue the vision from his dream, seeking an alliance with an empress who might be manipulating him for her own purposes. The fate of two species might well depend on his choice. The meeting that afternoon was tense, with clear divisions emerging among the Resistance leadership. Some, like Major Kell, advocated for immediate military action to secure the Mount Rainier site before the Empire could move the device, if it still existed. Others, like Governor Chen, urged caution and further intelligence gathering before committing their limited resources. We have a network of sympathizers within the imperial bureaucracy, she argued. Let us use them to confirm the device's existence and location before we risk everything on a military operation. Every hour we delay gives the Empire more time to find us, Kell countered. Commander Harrow's escape has them on high alert. They'll be watching all former war sites with increased scrutiny. Jax listened to the debate without immediately taking sides, his mind still wrestling with the implications of his dream. Finally, when there was a lull in the argument, he spoke up. There's another possibility we should consider, he said carefully. One that doesn't involve direct military confrontation with the Empire. All eyes turned to him expectantly. What if the Empress herself is not our enemy, he suggested. The reaction was immediate and predominantly negative. Exclamations of disbelief and dismissal erupted around the table. The Empress is the embodiment of our oppression, Williams stated flatly. She's ruled the Empire with an iron hand for 2 centuries. Has she? Jax challenged. From what I've gathered since my awakening, conditions for humans have gradually improved under her rule. Education restrictions have eased. Movement between levels is more possible than it once was. Hybrid rights have expanded. At a glacial pace, Reed objected. At the current rate, it would take another 1,000 years to achieve anything resembling equality. Perhaps, Jax acknowledged. But what if the alternative is worse? What if the Crown Princess represents a faction that would reverse even those small gains? A thoughtful silence fell over the group. You have information you haven't shared, Governor Chen observed shrewdly. Jax nodded, then described his dream. The apparent communication from Empress Alara, her claims about her daughter's plans, and the suggestion that Lyra might be her granddaughter. When he finished, the reactions were mixed. Some dismissed it immediately as a hallucination or, worse, imperial psychic manipulation. Others were more contemplative. It would explain the unprecedented response to your escape, Dr. Elliot noted. If the Empress herself engineered your awakening as part of a countermove against her daughter. It could also be an elaborate trap, Williams warned, a way to lure our leadership into the open. Lyra had remained silent throughout Jax's explanation, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. Now she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I've always felt different, she admitted. Even among other hybrids, more connected to the Zenari psychic network, yet able to shield my thoughts in ways others couldn't. She looked at Jax. Could it be true? Could I be descended from the Empress herself? There's one way to find out, Dr. Elliot suggested. We have limited genetic testing capabilities here. If we compare Lyra's DNA with the Imperial genetic records in our database, do it, Governor Chen authorized. In the meantime, we need to consider our options carefully. If Commander Harrow's dream is accurate, we have 3 days before this ascension ceremony, where the Crown Princess plans to make her move. Not enough time to mount a proper military operation, Major Kell conceded reluctantly. But perhaps enough time for a smaller team to infiltrate the Imperial Palace, Jax suggested. If Lyra is indeed the Empress's granddaughter, she might be able to get us inside. This is madness, Williams objected. You're proposing to walk into the heart of the Empire based on a dream? I'm proposing to explore all options, Jax corrected him, including the possibility of an alliance that might spare countless lives on both sides. The debate continued for hours, with no clear consensus emerging. While they argued, Dr. Elliot took Lyra to the medical facility for genetic testing. When they returned, the doctor's expression confirmed what Jax had already begun to suspect. The results are conclusive, she announced. Lyra's genetic profile contains markers specific to the Imperial bloodline. She is, without question, a direct descendant of Empress Alara. The revelation changed the dynamic of the discussion. If Lyra was indeed of Imperial blood, her access to the palace and other secure facilities would be far greater than that of an ordinary hybrid engineer. I can get us inside, Lyra confirmed, still processing the implications of her newly discovered heritage. But only a small team. 2, perhaps 3 people at most. It's still an enormous risk, Governor Chen cautioned. If the Empress is not as benevolent as she presented herself in the commander's dream, you would be delivering yourselves directly into enemy hands. Sometimes the greatest victories require the greatest risks, Jax replied. I've spent 300 years as a preserved trophy. If there's even a chance to end this conflict without more bloodshed, I have to try. In the end, they reached a compromise. Jax and Lyra would attempt to make contact with the Empress, while the Resistance prepared for military action as a contingency. If they didn't return or make contact within 48 hours, the Resistance would proceed with an assault on the Mount Rainier facility, assuming the worst. Preparations moved quickly after that. Lyra was equipped with a sophisticated holographic disguise that would allow her to move through Imperial security as a mid-level bureaucrat. Jax would be disguised as her aide, with similar technology masking his features. They were provided with limited weapons, nothing that would trigger security scans, but enough to give them a fighting chance if things went wrong. The most difficult part of the plan was getting back into the city. The Imperial forces had established checkpoints on every approach, searching for the fugitives who had embarrassed them so thoroughly. But the Resistance had one advantage: a network of ancient subway tunnels that predated the Zanari occupation, many of which had been deliberately left off official maps. As dawn broke on the day of their departure, Jax found himself standing with Lyra at the entrance to one such tunnel, a crumbling passage that would supposedly lead them directly beneath the Imperial Palace itself. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra asked him quietly. "It's not too late to turn back." Jax glanced behind them, where Reed and a small team of Resistance fighters waited to seal the tunnel after their passage. "No," he said firmly. "It's been too late to turn back since the moment you woke me." With that, they stepped into the darkness, guided only by the faint glow of ancient emergency lighting that still functioned after 3 centuries of neglect. The tunnel stretched before them like the throat of some primordial beast, swallowing them into the unknown. The journey through the tunnel system was arduous and tense. Parts had collapsed over the centuries, requiring them to crawl through narrow passages or find alternative routes. Twice they encountered automated security drones patrolling the deeper sections, forcing them to hide in maintenance alcoves until the danger passed. "The Empire knows about these tunnels," Jax observed after their second near discovery. "Some of them," Lyra agreed, "but they consider them a low security risk. The official belief is that most collapsed during the cleansing." They continued in silence for several more hours, gradually ascending toward the upper levels of the city. Finally, they reached a sealed door that, according to the Resistance maps, should open into a maintenance area beneath the Imperial Palace itself. "This is it," Lyra said, examining the security panel beside the door. "Once we're inside, We'll have perhaps 30 minutes before the standard security sweep. We need to find a secure communication terminal where I can attempt to contact the Empress directly. And if we can't? Jax asked. Then we fall back to the contingency plan, she replied grimly. Try to reach the Ascension Hall where the ceremony will take place tomorrow. Make our case publicly, if necessary. Jax nodded. It was a desperate plan, but they had no better options. Lyra placed her hand on the security panel. Her genetic connection to the Imperial bloodline, their greatest hope for gaining entry without triggering alarms. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hiss, the door slid open. It worked, she whispered, clearly surprised despite her earlier confidence. The Empress's reach is long, Jax murmured, wondering again whether they were walking into salvation or a trap. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a vast maintenance level that served the palace's environmental and security systems. Zenari technology hummed all around them. Organic curves housing functions that human engineering could barely comprehend, even after centuries of exposure. Lyra led the way confidently, her technical training allowing her to navigate the complex systems. They encountered a few maintenance drones, but the holographic disguises held, and the machines paid them no special attention. There, Lyra pointed to a neural interface terminal, a curved structure resembling a throne made of living metal. That's a direct connection to the Imperial communication network. If the Empress is monitoring for us, I might be able to reach her directly. Jax surveyed the surrounding area, soldiers' instincts alert for any sign of ambush. How long will it take? Moments, if she's receptive. Longer if I have to navigate security protocols. Lyra approached the terminal with visible trepidation. I've never used a royal-level interface before. It's designed for those with much stronger psychic abilities than most hybrids possess. You're not most hybrids, Jax reminded her. If you truly are the Empress's granddaughter. Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath to center herself. Stand watch. This will require my complete concentration. As Lyra settled into the living metal chair, Jax positioned himself where he could observe all approaches to their position. The maintenance level was quiet, but he knew that could change in an instant if they were discovered. The interface activated as soon as Lyra made contact, illuminating her face with a soft blue glow. Her eyes closed, her expression becoming distant as her consciousness extended into the Zenari network. Minutes passed in tense silence. Suddenly, Lyra gasped, her body stiffening. She's here, she whispered. The Empress. I can feel her presence. Jax watched anxiously as Lyra's face reflected a rapid succession of emotions. Surprise, wonder, confusion, and finally, a deep, profound understanding. Tears began to stream down her cheeks, though her eyes remained closed. What is it? Jax asked urgently. What's happening? She's showing me everything, Lyra responded, her voice distant. The truth, my heritage, her plans. Her breathing became more rapid. Jax, she wants to meet us. Now. She's sending coordinates. Before Jax could respond, an alarm sounded in the distance, the security sweep they had feared, perhaps triggered by their unauthorized use of the royal interface. We need to move, he urged, gently pulling Lyra from the chair. Where are we going? Lyra's eyes snapped open, now filled with newfound purpose. The Heart Chamber. It's a secure room at the center of the palace. Few even know of its existence. She glanced at a nearby display panel. We have 7 minutes before security forces reach this level. They moved swiftly through the maintenance corridors. Lyra, now leading with absolute confidence, as if guided by an unseen hand. They ascended through service passages, avoided patrol routes with uncanny timing, and finally reached an unmarked door that seemed to blend perfectly into the surrounding wall. Lyra placed her palm against it, and the door silently receded, revealing a chamber unlike anything Jax had seen before. The circular room appeared to be formed from a single piece of living crystal, its walls pulsing with soft light that shifted through colors beyond human perception. At the center stood a slender figure, her back to them, draped in flowing robes of an iridescent material that seemed to capture and reflect the room's ethereal illumination. "Grandmother," Lyra whispered, the word falling from her lips with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face of ageless beauty, neither young nor old, but somehow transcendent of time itself. Her features held the distinctive marks of Zanari heritage, yet there was something unmistakably human in her eyes that fixed immediately on Jax with recognition and what might have been relief. "Commander Harrow," Empress Alara spoke, her voice melodious yet powerful. "After 3 centuries, we meet again, face to face this time, rather than mind to mind." Jax stood transfixed, seeing in this regal figure echoes of the frightened child he had tried to protect so long ago. "You've changed somewhat since our last meeting," he managed. A smile touched the Empress's lips. "As have you, though considerably less." She extended a hand toward Lyra. "Come, child. There is much to explain, and precious little time." As Lyra moved forward, drawn to her newly discovered grandmother, Jax remained cautious. "How do we know this isn't an elaborate trap?" he asked bluntly. 300 years of imperial rule suggest your priorities may not align with humanity's best interests." "A fair question," Alara acknowledged. "One I cannot answer with words alone." She gestured to a crystalline pedestal that rose from the floor at her command. Atop it rested a familiar cylindrical object, the device from Jax's memories. "Perhaps this will convince you of my sincerity." Jax stared at the device in shock. "You kept it all this time?" "I protected it," Alara corrected. "As I protected you. Both too dangerous to destroy, too valuable to let fall into the wrong hands." She looked at him with ancient sadness. "You tried to save me when I was a child. Jax Harrow. That act of compassion changed the course of my life, and perhaps the fate of 2 species." "Yet you conquered Earth," Jax countered. "Enslaved humanity." "I prevented humanity's extinction," she replied firmly. "The War Council voted unanimously for sterilization of Earth and all human colonies. I was the only voice of dissent, a young hybrid princess with little influence beyond curiosity value." Her gaze grew distant with memory. "I convinced them that humans were more valuable as subjects than as corpses. It was the best I could do at the time." "And since then?" Jax pressed. 3 centuries of oppression?" 3 centuries of gradual, careful progress," Alara corrected. "Each generation of humans living slightly better than the last. Each decade bringing small but meaningful changes to imperial policy." She fixed him with a penetrating stare. "Revolution would have meant extinction. Commander, evolution was the only viable path." Lyra had moved to stand beside her grandmother, studying the device with obvious fascination. "This is what the Crown Princess seeks? This is why you woke the commander?" "Yes," Alara confirmed grimly. "My daughter Vexora has discovered the device's true potential, not merely as a communication tool, but as a means of complete psychic dominance. With it, she could enslave every hybrid mind in the Empire, creating an army bound to her will alone." "And what do you intend to do with it?" Jax asked, still suspicious. "What it was always meant to do," Alara replied. "Before war corrupted its purpose. Unite minds, not control them. Create understanding rather than dominance." She gestured to Lyra. "My granddaughter possesses the perfect neural pattern, balance between human intuition and Zanari psychic ability. Through her, the device could create a true union between our species, voluntary and mutual. A peace offering, Jax translated. Rather than a weapon? Precisely, Alara confirmed. But Vexora moves against me. The Ascension ceremony tomorrow is actually a coup. She has the loyalty of the military, the support of pure-blood traditionalists. Once she takes the throne, her first act will be to activate the device, using a hybrid whose mind she has already broken to her will. Can't you simply cancel the ceremony? Jax asked. You're still Empress. Alara shook her head sadly. The ceremony is traditional, expected. Canceling it would only accelerate Vexora's plans. Our only hope is to use the device first, to establish the voluntary connection before she can impose the forced one. And you need Lyra to do this, Jax concluded, looking at the young hybrid with concern. I need both of you, Alara corrected. Lyra to operate the device, and you, Commander, to protect her while she does so. Your military expertise, your knowledge of the device's original purpose, both are essential. Jax studied the Empress carefully, searching for any sign of deception. He found none, but centuries of preservation had left him cautious. And the Resistance? What happens to them in this new united future you envision? They become partners, rather than rebels, Alara replied without hesitation. The changes I've implemented slowly over centuries could be accelerated dramatically once the connection is established. True equality within a generation, perhaps less. Before Jax could respond, a subtle vibration ran through the chamber. Alara's expression darkened. Vexora's forces are moving earlier than anticipated, she said urgently. She must have detected your presence. She lifted the device from its pedestal and handed it to Lyra. There's no more time. We must proceed now, or all is lost. What do you need me to do? Lyra asked, holding the device with reverent care. Connect with it. Open your mind completely. I will guide you through the initial stages, but only you can establish the full connection. Alara turned to Jax. Commander, the door will seal behind me. You must defend this chamber at all costs, until the process is complete. Where are you going? Jax demanded. To delay my daughter, Alara replied grimly. To give you the time you need. She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at them both. 3 centuries ago, I was a frightened child, and you showed me compassion, Jax Harrow. Today, I ask you to show that same compassion to all our peoples. With those words, she slipped through the door, which sealed seamlessly behind her, leaving Jax and Lyra alone with the device that might determine the fate of 2 species. Do you trust her? Lyra asked quietly, staring at the cylindrical object in her hands. I'm not sure, Jax admitted. But I believe she was telling the truth about the Crown Princess. And right now, that makes her the lesser of 2 evils. Lyra nodded, then settled cross-legged on the floor, placing the device before her. I've never done anything like this before, she confessed, fear evident in her voice. You were born for this, Jax assured her, taking up a position near the door. Literally, it seems. A faint smile touched Lyra's lips before she closed her eyes and placed her hands on the device. It responded immediately to her touch, illuminating with a soft, pulsating glow that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. Outside the sealed chamber, Jax could hear the distant sounds of conflict, energy weapons discharging, orders being shouted, the distinctive hum of Zanari defense systems activating. The coup had begun, and they were trapped in its epicenter. Within the chamber, Lyra's connection to the device deepened. The light emanating from it intensified, spreading to encompass her entire body in a cocoon of radiance, not unlike the one that had preserved Jax for 3 centuries. Her expression reflected an inner journey of discovery and wonder, as her consciousness expanded beyond the confines of her physical form. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the sounds of battle outside growing closer. Jax checked his weapon, a compact energy pistol with limited charges, and prepared for the inevitable breach attempt. When it came, it was not from the door, but from the ceiling. A section of the crystalline structure suddenly darkened, molecules rearranging as some unknown technology disrupted its integrity. Jax aimed his weapon upward, ready to fire at the first sign of hostile entry. The ceiling shattered, raining crystal shards that dissolved into light before they reached the floor. Through the breach dropped a squad of armored figures, led by a tall, regal Zanari female, whose resemblance to Alara was unmistakable, though her features were harder, colder. "How predictable," Crown Princess Vexora sneered, her gaze sweeping dismissively over Jax before fixing on Lyra and the device. "Mother always did favor her little experiments. First you, Commander Harrow, and now this hybrid abomination." "Your mother is trying to save both our species," Jax replied, keeping his weapon trained on her despite the overwhelming odds. Vexora laughed, a sound entirely devoid of warmth. "Save them? By diluting them? By erasing the distinctions that make the Zanari superior?" She gestured to her guards. "Secure the device. Kill them both." The guards moved forward, weapons raised. Jax fired, dropping the first with a precision shot to the junction between helmet and armor. The others scattered, taking cover behind the room's crystalline features, returning fire that forced Jax to dive for protection. Behind him, Lyra remained in deep communion with the device, seemingly unaware of the deadly conflict erupting around her. The cocoon of light surrounding her had intensified, now forming a partial barrier that deflected the energy beams directed her way. "She can't complete the connection," Vexora called out, circling to flank Jax's position. "Not without Mother's guidance. And Mother is indisposed." The implication sent a chill through Jax. "What have you done to her?" "Nothing she didn't deserve," Vexora replied coldly. "The weakness she showed toward humans, toward you, specifically, has undermined the Empire for centuries. That ends today." A coordinated volley from the guards forced Jax deeper into cover, his return fire becoming increasingly desperate as his weapon's charge depleted. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and rapidly running out of options. Then, unexpectedly, the crystalline walls began to pulse with an accelerating rhythm. The light surrounding Lyra expanded explosively, filling the chamber with blinding radiance. When Jax's vision cleared, he saw that Lyra had risen to her feet, the device floating before her, completely transformed. What had been a simple cylinder was now a complex geometric structure of light and energy, rotating with increasing speed. "Impossible," Vexora whispered, momentarily frozen in shock. "She can't have established the connection. Not without me?" A new voice echoed through the chamber as a figure of light materialized beside Lyra. Empress Alara, or some projection of her, stood proudly defiant. "You underestimate the power of our bloodline, daughter. Always so focused on purity that you fail to see the strength in diversity." "You're dead," Vexora hissed. "I killed you myself." "You killed my body," the luminous figure corrected. "But through the device, through Lyra, my consciousness endures." The apparition turned to Jax. "Commander, it is time to complete what we began 3 centuries ago." Understanding dawned on Jax. The device didn't just amplify psychic connections, it preserved them. Alara had transferred her consciousness into the network, becoming one with the very technology she had protected for centuries. "Guards!" Vexora commanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Destroy the device!" But as the guards raised their weapons, they hesitated, confusion evident in their movements. One by one, they lowered their arms, then removed their helmets, revealing expressions of awe and wonder. "They can hear it," Lyra spoke for the first time since beginning the connection. her voice overlaid with harmonics that suggested she was channeling more than just her own consciousness. The true voice of unity, not domination, but understanding, not control, but harmony. The device's rotation reached a crescendo, and a pulse of energy expanded outward, passing harmlessly through Jax and the guards, but striking Vexora with visible force. She staggered, clutching her head as if in pain. "No," she gasped. "I won't be contaminated by human weakness." "It isn't weakness you feel," Ilara responded gently. "It's empathy, understanding, the very qualities that make both our species worth preserving." Vexora sank to her knees, still fighting the connection but clearly weakening. "Father will never accept this," she managed through clenched teeth. "The purebloods will resist." "Some will," the luminous Ilara acknowledged. "Change is never easy, but they will be a minority, powerless against the united will of hybrids, humans, and those Zanari wise enough to embrace the future rather than cling to the past." The energy pulse continued to expand, presumably spreading throughout the palace, the city, perhaps even beyond. Jax felt nothing directly, being fully human, but he could see its effect on the Zanari and hybrids present, a profound transformation, as if veils were being lifted from their eyes. Vexora made one last, desperate lunge toward the device, but Jax intercepted her, restraining her despite her inhuman strength. "It's over," he told her firmly. "Accept it." "Kill me then," she spat. "I will not live in a world polluted by human influence." "Death is not your fate," Ilara pronounced. "Understanding is. Acceptance. In time. You are my daughter, and you too will find your place in the new order." The light from the device gradually subsided, leaving Lyra standing alone, the cylindrical object once again inert in her hands. The projection of Ilara had vanished, but something of her presence seemed to remain in Lyra's bearing, her newfound confidence and authority. "It's done," she announced simply. "The connection has been established. Across the city, across the planet, across the system, minds are opening to one another, not controlled, but connected." "And the Empress?" Jax asked quietly. "Part of the network now," Lyra replied, a hint of sadness touching her features. "Her physical form is gone, but her consciousness persists, guiding the connection." She looked down at the defeated Vexora. "As for my aunt, she will be contained until she can accept the new reality. There has been enough violence. Guards who moments before had been trying to kill them now stood at attention, awaiting Lyra's orders. The shift in loyalty was absolute and immediate, a testament to the power of the connection she had established. "What now?" Jax asked, feeling suddenly adrift. He had awakened to fight a war that no longer existed, to lead a resistance that was no longer needed. "Now," Lyra said with quiet certainty, "we rebuild. Together." She handed the device to one of the guards and approached Jax. "The resistance will be contacted immediately. Governor Chen, Major Kell, all of them. They will be welcomed to the palace as partners in creating a new society, not as defeated rebels." "And me?" Jax asked. "What place is there for a 300-year-old soldier in this new world of harmony?" Lyra smiled, touching his arm gently. "The same place there has always been for those who understand both war and peace. Teacher, guide, conscience." Her expression grew more serious. "We will need you, Jax Harrow. The connection ensures understanding. But the practical work of rebuilding a society based on equality, after centuries of stratification, that will require wisdom and experience." Jax considered this, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on him once more. Not the burden of leading humanity to victory in war, but perhaps the even heavier task of leading them to thrive in peace. "I will help," he promised, "for as long as I'm needed." As they left the chamber, Jax witnessed the transformation, already spreading throughout the palace. Zanari and human staff moved among each other with new awareness, new respect. Barriers, physical and psychological, were being dismantled before his eyes. In the grand entrance hall of the palace, they found a crowd gathering, resistance members being escorted in, not as prisoners, but as honored guests. Zanari officials welcoming them with genuine collegiality. Hybrids moving freely between both groups as living bridges between the species. Governor Chen spotted Jax and hurried over, her expression a mixture of confusion and cautious hope. "Commander, what's happening? We received a system-wide broadcast announcing the Empress's passing and the installation of her granddaughter as regent. Then the Imperial forces just stood down." "It's a long story," Jax replied with a tired smile. "But the short version is that we found a third path. Neither continued oppression nor bloody revolution." "The device?" Dr. Reeve asked, joining them. "You found it?" "We did," Lyra confirmed, "and used it as it was always meant to be used, to connect minds, not control them." As Lyra moved away to greet other resistance leaders, Reeve studied Jax with professional concern. "You look exhausted, Commander. The regeneration compounds can only do so much. You should rest." Jax nodded absently, his attention caught by the scene unfolding around him. Former enemies engaged in earnest conversation, sharing ideas, finding common ground. It was more than he could have hoped for when he first awakened from his long sleep. "I've rested for 300 years, Doctor," he said finally. "I think I can manage a few more hours of wakefulness." In the days that followed, the transformation that had begun in the heart chamber spread across the planet and beyond. The connection, voluntary rather than forced, allowed for the maintenance of individual identity while fostering unprecedented empathy and understanding between species. Lyra, now officially recognized as regent until a new form of government could be established, moved quickly to implement reforms that would have taken Alara decades or centuries to achieve. Human sectors were opened, movement restrictions lifted, education opportunities equalized. A council was formed with equal representation from humans, hybrids, and Zanari to draft a new constitution for what was being called the United Worlds. Jax found himself increasingly in demand as an advisor, his unique perspective spanning both the pre-invasion Earth and the new emerging society proving invaluable. He worked closely with the former resistance leaders, helping them transition from fighters to builders, from rebels to statesmen, to... The most difficult cases were the pure-blood Zanari traditionalists, who, like Vexora, resisted the connection. Some chose self-imposed exile to remote colonies. Others, eventually, grudgingly, accepted the new reality as the benefits of unity became impossible to deny. 6 months after what was now being called the unification, Jax stood on a balcony overlooking the transformed city. The stratified levels were being systematically redesigned, the barriers between sectors removed, light and air now flowing freely to even the lowest levels. Construction crews, mixed teams of humans, hybrids, and Zanari worked around the clock. Their efforts coordinated with an efficiency that would have been impossible before the connection. Lyra joined him at the railing, her simple attire a deliberate contrast to the ornate imperial garments she had rejected. "Admiring the progress?" she asked. "Wondering if it's really this easy," Jax admitted. 3 centuries of occupation ended in a single day. No war, no bloodshed, just understanding. "Not easy," Lyra corrected. "The connection makes understanding possible, but acting on that understanding, rebuilding systems, reallocating resources, healing ancient wounds, that's the hard part." She sighed. "We still have so much to do." "But you've made a start," Jax encouraged her. "A better start than I could have imagined when I first woke up in that preservation chamber." Lyra smiled, then hesitated before asking, "Have you given any more thought to my offer?" The offer she referred to was the opportunity to connect with Alara's consciousness within the network, to speak directly with the entity that had once been the Empress, now existing as a guiding presence within the psychic web that united the species. "I'm still considering it," Jax replied carefully. "It's a lot to process." "She wants to thank you," Lyra said simply, "for the compassion you showed a frightened child 300 years ago, for the example you set that shaped her entire life." Jax gazed out at the city, at what had once been Earth and was becoming something new, something neither fully human nor fully Zanari, but perhaps better than either had been alone. "Tell her I'll speak with her soon," he decided. "But first, there's more work to be done." He gestured to the construction below. "The future won't build itself." Lyra nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know, my grandmother preserved you for a reason, Jax Harrow, not just for what you knew, but for who you are. In a time of change, people need constants, reminders of the best of what was, guides to what could be." "I'm just a soldier," Jax demurred. "You're a bridge," Lyra corrected, "between the Earth that was and the united worlds that will be. Between memory and hope." She touched his arm gently. "Just as I am a bridge between human and Zanari. We both have roles to play in what comes next." As she left him to his thoughts, Jax reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. 300 years in a cocoon, awakened by a whisper, a desperate escape, a resistance on the brink of war, and then a third path none of them had anticipated. The amber preservation fluid that had held him, suspended between life and death, had been a prison, but also, in its way, a cocoon of transformation. He had emerged from it, not as the same soldier who had entered, but as something new, a living memory, a connection to humanity's past, and now, unexpectedly, a builder of its future. Below him, the city continued its metamorphosis. Above, the stars beckoned with possibilities that neither humans nor Zanari had imagined during their centuries of conflict. And within the connection that now united them all, the consciousness that had once been a frightened hybrid child named Alara watched over her legacy, a future born not from conquest or rebellion, but from the simple, powerful act of understanding. Jax Harrow, the man who had slept for 3 centuries in an alien cocoon, finally understood why he had been awakened. Not to fight a war, but to help build a peace. Not to lead a resistance, but to guide a unification. Not to avenge the past, but to safeguard the future. In the end, perhaps that was victory enough.